Section 6. The impact of the Fair Housing Act. Today's Fair Housing Rules and Regulations, 2026 Standard. Introduction. From Decisions to Consequences. In the last section, we walked through real legal hotline scenarios, those moments where agents must make fast decisions under pressure. You saw how a single question about buyer letters, disability accommodations, or even client selection can turn into a fair housing issue. Now let's zoom out. What happens after those decisions are made? What is the real impact of the Fair Housing Act, not just on individual transactions, but on the entire real estate industry, your business, and the communities you serve? This section ties everything together. If Section 3 showed you how discrimination happens, and Section 4 showed you how to respond, this section shows you why it all matters, and what happens when it goes right or wrong. The core impact: making discrimination illegal in housing. At its core, the Fair Housing Act changed the real estate industry forever by making discrimination in housing transactions illegal. Before this law, people were routinely denied housing or financing based on prejudice. Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, known as the Fair Housing Act, made it illegal to discriminate in the sale, rental, or financing of housing based on protected characteristics. Later amendments expanded these protections to include disability, familial status, families with children, pregnant women. This means that today, every transaction you are involved in is governed by these protections. Impact on real estate professionals: you are accountable. Let's bring this into your world. As a real estate agent, broker, or property manager, you are directly impacted by the Fair Housing Act every day. The law applies to listing agents, buyer's agents, landlords, leasing agents, appraisers, lenders. HUD enforces these laws and ensures that all parties in a housing transaction operate fairly. Real-world example, 2026. If you refuse to show a property, alter terms of a deal, use improper advertising language based on a protected class, you are violating federal law. There is no gray area once discrimination is proven. Prevention of discrimination: changing everyday behavior. One of the biggest impacts of the Fair Housing Act is how it changed everyday behavior in real estate. Today, it is illegal to refuse to sell or rent to someone in a protected class, offer different terms or conditions, deny access to services like MLS, interfere with someone exercising their rights. Think back to Section 3, steering, misrepresentation, and subtle bias. The Fair Housing Act directly targets those behaviors even when they are disguised as business decisions. Example. Scenario. A landlord charges higher deposits for families with children. That is discrimination based on familial status and illegal. Impact on lending and financing. The Fair Housing Act doesn't stop at buying and selling. It extends into financing. Lenders cannot deny loans based on protected classes, offer worse loan terms, charge higher interest rates. This means discrimination can occur even if the agent did everything right, but the lender did not. 2026. Risk Insight. With AI underwriting and data tracking, lending discrimination is under increased federal scrutiny. Impact on advertising, one of the biggest risk areas. Now, let's talk about one of the most common violations: advertising. The Fair Housing Act makes it illegal to publish any statement that shows preference or limitation based on protected classes. Examples: Christian neighborhood, no kids, ideal for young professionals. Even if the property qualifies for an exemption, advertising is still regulated. 2026 reality. MLS listings, social media posts, and online ads are all monitored, and violations are easier to prove than ever. Blockbusting and historical impact. Let's step back historically for a moment. Before fair housing laws, practices like blockbusting were common. Agents would scare homeowners into selling below market value by suggesting minority groups were moving in, then resell at a profit. This created segregated neighborhoods, artificial market manipulation, long-term economic inequality. The Fair Housing Act made these practices illegal and reshaped how communities develop. Impact on communities, beyond the transaction. The impact of fair housing goes far beyond individual deals. When enforced properly, it creates equal access to housing, stronger, more diverse communities, fair property values, increased economic opportunity. When violated, it leads to segregation, wealth gaps, legal consequences, loss of trust in the industry. The role of exemptions, where agents get in trouble. Now let's talk about something that confuses many agents: exemptions. Certain situations may be exempt under federal law, such as owner-occupied properties with 4 or fewer units, certain single-family home sales, religious organizations, senior housing under strict rules. But here's the key: even if a property is exempt, advertising rules still apply, and in many cases, Arizona law may be stricter than federal law. 2026 example. A listing says 55 plus only to own. That could be a violation, even if the community qualifies for an age exemption. Impact of the Age Discrimination Act, 1975. Another layer of impact comes from the Age Discrimination Act. This law prohibits discrimination based on age in programs receiving federal funding. Example: a federally funded housing program denies a 20-year-old applicant solely due to age. That is illegal. This shows how fair housing extends beyond just the Fair Housing Act itself. It works alongside other laws. Bringing it all together, why this matters in 2026. The Fair Housing Act has fundamentally reshaped how agents conduct business, how properties are marketed, how lenders operate, how communities grow, and most importantly, it defines your legal and ethical responsibilities. In 2026, success in real estate is not just about closing deals. It's about staying compliant, protecting your clients, managing risk, upholding fairness, because every decision you make contributes to the bigger picture. Online discussion. Question 1. How has the Fair Housing Act changed real estate practices? Answer: it made discrimination illegal and requires equal treatment in all housing-related transactions, including advertising, lending, and leasing. Question 2. Why is advertising one of the highest risk areas for violations? Answer: because any language that suggests preference or limitation based on protected classes is illegal and easily documented. Question 3. How do fair housing laws impact communities long-term? Answer: they promote equal access, reduce segregation, and support economic growth and stability.